Healing doesn't give you permission to be a shitty human being, yet you're not protecting your peace if you're burning every single bridge. It's easier to blame others than it is to hold yourself accountable. Hello, welcome back to Self Above Else, a podcast for the woman who dares to grow. I'm Zahra, your host, and this is where we get real about personal growth, self-acceptance, and navigating life's chaos. Over here, there's no filtering, no pretending, no sugarcoating, just raw, honest conversations that help you finally put yourself first. So we've all seen it, and maybe you've done it. You go through a breakup, a loss, or some deep personal transformation. Then you get to the point where you finally start working on yourself. You finally start your healing journey, your growth journey. And suddenly, I'm healing becomes your favorite excuse. You start ignoring people, you start cutting people off, but not because they're toxic. It's because they're a reflection, because they're holding up a mirror to you that you don't want to face, that you don't want to look at. You refuse to hold yourself accountable with the excuse of protecting your peace. Or better yet, you know how everyone talks about their healing era? Like it's some sort of magical time where nothing and no one can get to them, right? See, the thing about that is no one tells you how easy it is to cross the line from protecting your peace to just being an. And I get it. When you are choosing yourself, it feels good. Maybe for the first time ever, you're finally putting yourself first, and that feels good. Understandable. It's very understandable. But healing and growing isn't about isolating yourself to the point where you are cutting people off just because they're challenging you. And if you're not careful, you'll mistake emotional avoidance with emotional growth. If you think your healing era means that you are above correction, that you're above accountability, you're wrong. But on top of that, you're not healing. You're hiding, you're running, you're ignoring very important things in very important moments. I remember a time where I was so deep in my healing era and I was so caught up in focusing on myself that I started pushing people away, friends, family, the people that genuinely cared about me. And I started cutting people off over the smallest inconveniences. Like someone didn't text me back fast enough, done. Or someone held me accountable. Oh, they just don't understand my journey. They just don't understand my growth. And the more I did it, the more I felt like I was finally in control. I convinced myself that I was choosing me when in reality I was avoiding so many things and I was avoiding holding myself accountable. I was avoiding any type of emotional labor. And then one day, after shutting someone out for challenging me, I realized I was becoming a terrible person and I wasn't becoming a better version of myself. I wasn't growing at all. I wasn't actually healing. I was becoming the toxic one. And I had to ask myself, am I genuinely healing or am I just building walls and calling it growth? So if you are where I've been, if you've been where I've been, if you're just curious, this is the episode for you. So in this episode, we're breaking down what does it actually mean to heal and where do most of us get it wrong. So we're going to start it off with the weaponization of boundaries because some of you are using them as an emotional escape route. So there's definitely a difference between an actual boundary that you have and then using a boundary as a weapon. For example, when you say something like, I'm just protecting my peace as an excuse to avoid hard conversations or accountability, that's not a boundary, that's emotional avoidance. And boundaries aren't meant to protect your well being, they're not meant to shut people off or cut people off the moment things get uncomfortable. That's not a boundary. Those aren't boundaries. Too often we use boundaries as an excuse to avoid accountability, to avoid hard conversations, because let's be honest here, it's easier to cut someone off than it is to truly express your emotions, than it is to truly express yourself and be like, hey, what you did hurt me, or hey, I'm hurt. Think about the last time you distanced yourself from someone. Before you did that, did you communicate your needs, or did you disappear and label them as toxic? Because that's easier, right? And here's the thing, this mindset isn't just about boundaries, it's also about the excuses you use and the way that you hide behind the new you, right? This new you that is finally healing. And that actually leads me to number two, which is the cop out that practically every single one of us use. And that is, this is just how I am. This is who I am. Saying this is just who I am, this is just how I am, isn't an excuse. And it isn't empowerment if you're using it to avoid growth. If you are using it as your go to for everything, if everything is happening and you're just like, well, that's just how I am. Someone is holding you accountable and you're just like, oh, well, that's just how I am. I can't help it. What? Because if your healing journey has made you cold, it's made you detached, it's made you impossible to reach, then it's a wall. It's an armor. It's literally a wall that you're putting up, that you're creating. If you keep justifying what you're doing, how you're doing it, the behaviors that you have that are harmful with I've changed or this is who I am now, then what you're really saying is I don't want to do the work to be better. And in that case, are you really actually healing? Are you really actually growing? You're not. You're not. You're regressing. You're going back in time. And if that's not enough, there's something that happens underneath the surface with most of us women that we don't like to talk about, that we rarely talk about, and that is accountability. Specifically, healing without holding yourself accountable isn't actually healing. Listen, you can journal all you want, you can meditate all you want, you can pray all you want, you can, cut off negativity and toxicity all you want. But if you are not reflecting, if you are not holding yourself accountable, then all of that work is surface level. All of it is surface level. True healing means owning up to you. It means owning up to how you show up. Even if how you show up is messy, even if it's uncomfortable, it's genuinely about showing up. And if in this journey you are hurting people, you are damaging people, then it's time to ask yourself, am I really healing or am I just protecting my ego? Thing I just also want to mention that's going to lead to the next point is sometimes you won't get the closure that you want and you have to heal anyway. You have to face yourself anyway because it's your journey, it's your experience, and no one else's. And you can't expect everyone to be on board, and that's okay. Which leads me to number four, healing even when you don't get closure. I genuinely believe that when you decide to start healing, when you do go on this journey, or if you're currently in this journey, do not expect people to support you. Do not expect to have the wounds that are open be healed by other people. Do not expect apologies from people because those are all things you can't control. You can't control other people. You can only control you. And so you have to control your own healing journey. You have to control your own growth journey because not everyone is going to give you the apology that you think you deserve. And you can't let that stop you. You can't let that be the thing that pauses your growth. You can't let that be the thing that holds you back from moving on. Closure is not something that someone else gives you. Closure is not something that you get once that person apologizes. It's something that happens with you. It's something that happens inside here. It's an inside job. It's internal. You don't need someone else's permission to move on, to finally let yourself be free of whatever it is that you're healing from. If you're waiting for validation in order for you to heal, it'll never happen. It'll never happen, and it'll always be surface level, and there'll always be cracks in that wound. There'll always be cracks in that healing. So you'll never truly heal. It'll just be like putting a band-aid over it. even though the wound is still open. And that brings me to number 5, which is owning your impact in addition to your intention. It's so easy to say, this wasn't my intention. I didn't mean it that way when you hurt someone, when you've wronged someone, right? But your intentions doesn't erase the damage that you did because your growth isn't real, it isn't authentic until you are willing to own up to your own mistakes, own up to your own actions, including those actions that may have harmed people, that may have caused pain to people, no matter what you meant by them, you know? Okay, so there's one more part of this that I want to touch on, because it's a part that so many women get completely wrong, and that is number 6, the difference between protecting your peace and avoidance. So protecting your peace and protection overall about creating a space about creating a space to heal while still being responsible for how you show up. While avoidance is about cutting people off, dodging hard conversations, refusing to face yourself. So we've laid it all out and now you know all of this, right? But knowing isn't enough. Now it's time to actually do something about it. So I'm going to share with you a couple of things that you can do to make sure that while you are in your healing era, in your healing journey, you're actually healing and you're not being a person and you're actually holding yourself accountable throughout this journey, throughout this experience. So the first thing here is asking yourself the hard questions. Look, I know that facing reality can be very hard. And I know that you're probably used to seeing a lot of content about healing and growth and self care and self development being this really aesthetic, really fun thing, but it's not. It's hard. It's really, really hard. But on the other side of it is such an incredible woman that is waiting for you. And that's why it's so important to ask yourself the hard questions and to answer them honestly. Are you actually healing or are you using it as an excuse to do whatever you want? Even if that means being a terrible person, even if that means being cruel and rude, are you healing or is it just your ego? Is your ego stronger than your intention to heal? Anyone that has gone through healing, anyone that has gone through any sort of growth in their life, will tell you it's not comfortable, it's not fun, it's not easy. It forces you to sit with yourself. It forces you to look at yourself, to sit with the parts of you that you really don't want to face. And that's not something that's comfortable, right? A lot of us skip that part, and a lot of us skip to the part where, we get external validation. We use I'm focusing on myself as our go to, right? As our default. And we use it as a free pass to avoid hard conversations, to avoid accountability, to avoid the hard parts of growth, to avoid the hard parts of healing. I highly recommend asking yourself the following questions. Am I setting boundaries or am I just avoiding responsibility? Am I healing or am I isolating myself because it's easier? Am I growing or am I protecting my ego? And that last one is so incredibly important because in this life, as you grow, as you navigate life more, as you have more life experiences, you're going to learn that ego is way more than just men and their ego. A lot of us women have egos as well. You have an ego. I have an ego. But when it comes to healing, when it comes to growing, when it comes to discovering who you authentically are, being who you authentically are, it is so incredibly important to check your ego at the door. Your ego cannot exist there. You cannot heal and have an ego. You can't. You can't allow that to overpower everything. And that brings me to the next thing, and it's where a lot of us go wrong, and that is we care more about defending our intentions than we do about the impact that those intentions have on people. I mentioned it earlier, right? You may end up damaging people, hurting people, even if you don't intend to. And just because you don't intend to hurt people doesn't mean that you don't hurt people. And part of holding yourself accountable, part of healing is actually asking yourself and actually reflecting on when you have been the problem, reflecting on when you have been toxic, reflecting on when you weren't so great. Because it doesn't matter if that wasn't your intention. It doesn't matter if you didn't mean it that way. If someone tells you what you did hurt them, if someone tells you you hurt me, if someone tells you those things and your first response is to defend yourself, that's not growing. That's not healing. That's not accountability. That's you missing the point. You've already missed the point. I mean, think about it. Think about like if the tables were turned and you told someone you hurt me and they start giving you all these excuses. You're going to be like, I don't care about your excuses. That's not the point. Your excuses aren't the point, right? So think about how it is with other people too. If you don't want that for you, so why would you do that to others? When you say things like, I was just protecting my peace. Well, I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm being honest. I didn't mean it that way. That's just how I am. That's what you're really doing when you say these things is you're justifying the harm that you're causing. You're justifying being a person, even if it's not your intention, And instead of, you're making all these justifications, you're making all these excuses instead of just owning up to it. Just own up to it. There are so many broken relationships, broken friendships, broken bonds that could have easily been fixed had people talked, had people owned up to their mistakes, had people simply apologize and try to move forward together. Sometimes we think that when someone is doing bad things or when someone is causing harm, when someone is hurting people, that they're doing it intentionally. Sometimes you're not doing it intentionally. Sometimes people don't do it with the intention to hurt you. They just end up doing so, right? Your intention might be pure, but the damage is still done. Your pure intention, your good intention doesn't erase the damage that you did. It doesn't erase the hurt that you caused. People remember the harm that you did, the hurt that you caused. They don't remember your intentions. And so, if you are serious about actually healing, about actually growing, then you need to be just as serious about repairing any hurt, any damage that you may have done, even if it wasn't intentional, especially if it wasn't intentional. Let's talk about apologies, which is number 3, specifically how we butcher apologies. Most of us apologize to escape discomfort. We apologize to make it easy, to get out of it, right? Normally, we don't apologize to make things right. That's why we hear so many weak, half hearted apologies. Apologies like, I'm sorry if you felt that way. I didn't mean to upset you. I'm sorry, but here's why I did it. None of these are real apologies. They're excuses, they're damage control. Real apologies look like and sound like, I was wrong. No excuses, no justifications, just I was wrong. Or I'm sorry I hurt you. No sugarcoating, just naming the harm that you caused and apologizing. Or just a simple, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And saying it like you mean it because you genuinely mean it. Just, I'm sorry. Straight to the point. These are all examples of real apologies. These are all apologies that are not only real, but there's no ego attached to them. If you can't apologize without protecting your ego, then you care more about being right than you care about making things right. And that leads me to number 4, which is relearning what boundaries actually are. So in my healing era has become an aesthetic, right? And as a result, boundary has become a buzzword, right? We see it everywhere. Ooh, my boundaries. Ooh, this is my boundary. What are your boundaries? And we don't really know what those are. We don't really know what that is. You don't really know what that is for you. You're going off of what you've seen on social media. You're going off of what people have told you. Boundaries are very specific to each person because we all have different experiences. Let's just get this out of the way now. Boundaries are not walls. They're not weapons, and they're not weapons that you can use as an excuse to cut people off when you get uncomfortable or as an excuse to be a terrible person. A real boundary is something like this is how I want to be treated. And then you have your own list of how you want to be treated. Or this is what I can and this is what I cannot give. And you have that list of everything you can give and everything you cannot give. Those are boundaries. Fake boundaries, which are usually used as weapons and which are actually walls, look like I don't have to explain myself to anyone. I can treat people however I want and call it self-care. Those aren't real boundaries. Those are fake boundaries. Those are walls. Those are excuses to be a terrible person. So you have to ask yourself, is this boundary about protecting my energy or avoiding conversations? Am I setting boundaries or am I shutting people out to avoid being challenged? And this leads me to the biggest lie, the biggest fake boundary of them all, and that is that's just who I am. Okay, so yes, your healing era, your healing journey changes you, right? And yes, growth changes you, but it shouldn't make you harder to love. If this new version of you that's healing, that's growing, is defensive, dismissive, or harder to reach, then you're not growing, you're not evolving, you're not healing, you're actually regressing. And you're doing more harm to yourself than you realize. Because the truth is, I'm healing isn't an excuse for you to be a cold person, for you to be a cruel person, for you to be a disrespectful person. If the people who loved you before your healing journey, before your growth journey, now they can't recognize you, maybe it's not because they can't handle the fact that you've grown. They can't handle the fact that you're healing. Maybe it's because who you've become now is a woman that stopped caring about the damage that she leaves behind. You are leaving all these breadcrumbs of damage, all these breadcrumbs of hurt to those people. And so you're actually not growing, you're regressing. And that's who they can't recognize, even though you think you're growing. Okay, so we've broken it all down. Now here's a challenge on what to do if you're serious about getting it right. For the next 7 days, I want you to do this every night. Reflect on one moment in your day where you could have handled something differently and ask yourself, was I acting from healing or from avoidance? And if you are in the wrong in any way, own up to it, apologize, and make a note of all of that during these next 7 days. The goal isn't to be perfect. The goal isn't to make this extreme progress. It's just to start. I always, always, always talk about how important it is to start. And if the challenge is uncomfortable for you, if it's hard, good. It's meant to be. That's why it's a challenge. And be sure to DM me on Instagram or comment under this episode and let me know how this challenge works for you. Listen, your healing journey should make you better. It shouldn't make you bitter or cruel or entitled or unapproachable because of your rudeness. Because if your growth, if your healing is isolating you from accountability, then you're not really growing. You're not really healing. You're just running away from the truth. You're just building up walls. You're just creating so much more damage for yourself and for others. You are just hurting other people. And you know how the saying goes, hurt people hurt people. And don't be one of those. Don't be one of those women. We have it hard enough. Don't be one of those women that makes it hard for other women. And that's it for this episode. Thank you for tuning in, but more importantly, thank you for existing. Let me know your thoughts on this, your personal growth progress, or anything else. I read all your comments, so don't be shy. And by the way, if you want more, every week I write personal, deep letters to my future self that you can read and relate to. Just check out my email newsletter, which I'll have linked in the show notes and the YouTube description box. Until next time, self above else.